Hello, everyone. It's Doug Woodward. It's time again for the hot seat, and I have got the guy that I've got his seat already warming up. It's going to be a hot seat for him today. He's my friend Douglas Hamp, Dr. Douglas Hamp, and he's an author. He's written a number of books. He got a doctorate in theology at the Jerusalem University, if I'm not mistaken. And he and I are going to drill down into his new book, Corrupting the Image 2, Hybrids, Hades, and the Mount Hermon Connection. So, and we're going to dig into some stuff that I'm going to tell you, there aren't very many folks that we can talk to that are going to get into the level of depth about the Nephilim and how all this works and the impact on cosmology and all that. We're going to get into some pretty deep stuff here. So I think those of you that are students of the Bible and students of the whole giant Nephilim kind of genre, which has emerged over the last 10 years, that you're going to really enjoy our time together. So, hello, Doug Hamp. How are you?
Hey, thank you for having me, Doug. It is a pleasure to be in the hot seat. I can feel it pretty hot over here.
Yeah, warming up already, isn't it?
Indeed, yes.
So, well, it's great to have you. Tell the folks a little bit more about you, your background. Take a couple of minutes, talk a little bit about your church and so forth.
Absolutely, yeah. So I actually did my master's degree at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in Israel. That was quite a few moons ago. But I really, I learned a whole bunch at the Hebrew U. It was a very challenging experience. It was incredibly rewarding because, I thought I knew the Bible, and I went there and I'm like, I don't know anything, and so I got to study the languages, and it was just a phenomenal foundation. I later went and did my PhD at Louisiana Baptist University. And so now I'm the pastor at the Way Congregation in Lakewood, Colorado. That's right now outside of Denver. And I love Colorado. It's beautiful here. I love the mountains and love to ski. So that's kind of about me.
That's great.
And
also,
yeah,
the congregation.
Well, yeah, so the congregation's actually Messianic, kind of Hebrew roots, depending on which term you want to use. No term is really that great, because they're always shifting. But, we madly are in love with Jesus. We also want to keep the Sabbath. We want to keep the feasts. And we, of course, want to eat clean. And those are really the three distinctions that you'd find between us and probably an average, Sunday church, right? And so those are kind of our distinctives. But we really love Jesus, and we're looking forward to his return. We're looking forward to him establishing his kingdom here on this earth, and all of that amazing stuff.
That's
so
great. Well, you don't wear yarmulkes in your congregation, do you?
Well, some people do, but typically we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, the yarmulke or kippah is really it's a Jewish thing, right? And it came out of tradition. There's nothing in the Bible that says that we're supposed to wear a kippah. And so we're okay with people wearing them, but we don't believe that that's a commandment. And so we don't do that. We're not trying to be Jewish per se. We really see that God wants to put, the Jews and the church, so-called, put them back together, right? We see this in Ezekiel chapter 37 with the two sticks, and that's a whole nother show, right? But
Right. Yeah, we're going to do that
yeah,
show too. We, as you know, our good brother Douglas Krieger and I talked a bit about this a couple weeks ago, and I want to invite you and the other two authors of the book, Chris Steinley and Gavin Finley, to come on. As I jokingly said to you before we began, you know, just having Doug by himself is enough, but I figured with the three of you that we could get a good dose of what it means, Commonwealth theology, what it means, and so forth. So we want to do that before too long, actually. So
I'd love to.
so hopefully I won't do anything today that will cause you to not want to come back and again. So
I doubt it.
right?
I'll be glad to come back.
Good,
Yes.
good. Okay, well, tell us, just take a minute and talk about the first book, Corrupting the Image, that I thought was great stuff,
Thank you.
and then kind of how that bridged to wanting to do Corrupting the Image too.
Yeah. So Corrupting the Image 1, Angels, Aliens, and the Antichrist Revealed, really started with me staring at, Genesis 6 in particular. I was looking at the whole concept of the Nephilim. But then I was looking at Genesis 3:15, where God says, I will cause enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. And I'm like, wait a second. If her seed represents Messiah, then what about your seed, speaking to Satan? And that just set me on this quest to, just uncover this, to dig a lot deeper. And I discovered some very exciting things. I discovered a whole bunch about the genetics of the incarnation, which kind of blew my mind. And then I used that sort of as a template for what Satan has been trying to do by corrupting the image, right? Corrupting the image that we've been created in. And the basic, the bottom line here is that if Satan can disrupt the image that we've been created in, if he can mess up our DNA, let's put it that way, then, he possibly could have kept Messiah from coming. That's essentially the idea, right? He has this prophecy that a seed of the woman is going to come and crush his head. Now, Satan is a very clever dude, but he's not an idiot. He knows that God is also very clever. God is very resourceful. And if God makes a promise, God's probably going to keep it, right? So he's going to do everything he can to thwart this prophecy from coming true of this promised one coming and restoring what he stole from Adam and Eve. All right. So in Corrupting the Image 1, I looked at that a lot from the genetic perspective. I delved into kind of this whole thing of the aliens and whatnot, the so-called aliens and the so-called UFOs.
And to insert a bad pun at this point, you were looking into those things which angels fear to tread.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and so he's been doing, of course, a whole bunch of stuff. But, when I finished that book, I felt like I had covered a lot of ground, but, just as the years go on, I'm like, there's a whole bunch more to this story. And one of the things that kept popping up at me was Revelation chapter 17, where he talks about the beast that was, is not, and will ascend out of the abyss. And that is the beast that the woman is riding. And I'm like, wait, there's got to be something about this, So I started digging in to the ancient literature, and lo and behold, I find that Ishtar, who is the woman, she is actually on the back of a beast, right? I mean, this is just kind of mind-blowing stuff, right?
This is not necessarily Europa on top of Zeus, right? It goes beyond that.
Well, see, that's the amazing thing, is that the motif started in Babylon, but then it spread to the whole world, right? It spread everywhere. And so this Europa riding the bull of Zeus is simply a retelling of that original story.
It's the Greek version and then the Roman version.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what's so amazing about this, is that the Babylonian kingdom that was established by Nimrod, or really Satan, it started, of course, in the land of Shinar, started in Mesopotamia, but then it really made its way throughout the world. And we often think about these other countries coming and conquering Babylon, but really it was Babylon that conquered the other countries, even though politically they changed hands. Politically, Assyria took over, right? And then the Neo-Babylonians took over from Assyria, and then the Persians took over from Neo-Babylon. But it was always the Babylonian religion, the religious system, that was really winning the day because it was being exported.
Doug, is it fair to say that Babylon was sort of the final in the, well, we'll say in the Middle East, not counting, North Africa and Europe and all that, but in the Middle East, Babylon was related to the Akkadian religion, was related to the Sumerian religion, and that those three are all kind of, they're really similar, and they kind of fall one right after the other, such that you've got a period there of almost, well, it's going to work out to almost, in my book, about 3,000 years, and in your book, maybe 2,000 years. We have to talk about that.
Sure.
But it's, but Babylon is not really a lot different than the other Mesopotamian religions. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, they're really not different at all. They just changed names, basically.
Yeah.
Right. So this all starts back at the Tower of Babel. And I know the dates can be tricky, so I won't. I don't really have a big fight in that one.
We'll get in and talk a little bit about it.
But a while ago, right? It was before Abraham. Let's put it that way.
2,000 to 3,000 years ago. We'll put it that way.
I'm fine with that. Well, you mean 2,000 to 3,000
BC,
before Christ? Yeah.
So exactly. It's 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. So somewhere in that ballpark, I'm totally fine with that. But so this whole thing starts with Satan raising up Nimrod, who then establishes the Tower of Babel. Babel means the gate of the gods. All right. And he creates this false system. And then Inanna is the queen of heaven. That's literally what her name means. Sort
of the first instance, the original woman, I guess. Is that fair to say?
Yes, exactly. Right. And then Inanna then changes names to Ishtar. And then we know from Ishtar, she goes to Ashtoreth in the biblical tradition, Astarte in some of the Greek traditions. She then becomes Diana, Venus, Durga, Isis in the Egyptian tradition. Exactly. But it's all the same.
Us in America.
Well, and even Wonder Woman. What is her name? Diana, right?
Diana.
That's her name, right? And if you look at the thing that she has there, it's the 8-pointed star of Inanna. I mean, it's pretty crazy when you start putting it all together, right? So it all goes back to that woman.
I was gonna say, TV does a good job of teaching our kids the mythologies of the of the pagan world.
Oh, they sure do.
Yeah.
Right. A little too good.
Well, let me have you. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to kind of keep you on pace to certain things that I think we want to talk about, so that we kind of cover the kind of the core issues of the book. But the first, 50 pages or so, you spend a lot of time addressing the whole issue of the names of, ultimately, Satan. You talk a bit about why Lucifer is not a particularly good name for Satan, but if one cracks the books and goes back and studies Mesopotamian religion, you're going to come across these names like Enlil and Marquat and Nergal and so forth. Talk a little bit, if you would, about those names, a little bit about their progression, and kind of why we know that those names really are referencing the great dragon, if you will.
Right. Yeah. So that's another one of Satan's epithets in the book of Revelation, is the great dragon. Why is he called the great dragon, or the dragon, right? Like, where does this term come from? Certainly John was having a vision, but why that? Why did God show that? So when you go back into the ancient literature, you're like, well, if the Bible is true, which I believe it is, then we should find Satan, or we should find Lucifer. But you don't find them at all. The ancient literature is completely silent on those names. And that's because those are epithets. An epithet is just a title, right? It's just a nickname, if you will. So we have to understand something about the linguistics in order to go back. So when we go to Isaiah 14:12, where it says, "How you have fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning," right? That's in the King James version. So the word there, Lucifer, in the Hebrew is Halel. That's what we call a hapax legomena. Hapax legomena is a word that appears one time in Scripture,
Got anything
right?
special, huh?
Yeah,
Very special. It's only every
exactly.
time.
And
Yeah.
words that appear one time are really difficult to interpret because we don't have a lot of context
Right.
to go with that. But a good friend of mine, Bill, he actually went back and he looked at this. He wrote a paper on it, and Bill Gallagher, he shows in his paper that Halel in the Hebrew tradition, if we take that back to Akkadian, it becomes Elil. And if we go back one more step to Sumerian, then it's Enlil. All right. So Sumerian came first, then Akkadian. Akkadian and Assyrian are the same thing. All right.
Okay.
So Assyrian is the empire, Akkadian is the language.
Right.
And so in Akkadian, it's Elil. In Sumerian, it's Enlil. And he then went and showed how the same kinds of characteristics that you have of Enlil are true of Lucifer, so-called, right, or Halel in the
Right.
Bible. And I like, for
In
me,
very
that was,
specific ways too.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So for me, that was a key that unlocked
Mm-hmm.
this whole mystery. And then from there, I was just, I was going, I'm like, okay, yeah, he gave me the key to unlock all these other doors. And I'm really grateful for that, because without that, I would never have really, made this connection. But once I saw it, I was like, okay, he's onto something. I'm going for it. There's so many names that we really can discover. And it's kind of like understanding that, Satan has a lot of false passports, if you will, right? He's got all these other names, these aliases that he can use to deceive the world. And once we understand all those, and there's a lot, and I'm sympathetic to everybody, because it was a little bit of a trouble for me to keep my mind around all these different names.
You have a good chart though that I'm looking at here on my computer that really provides sort of all of the syncretisms, the epithets, and the references, and so forth. And so, yeah, there's a few that of course stand out that we'll talk more about. But you do a great job. Talk, if you will, though. One of the ones that I think is really core, which has to do with the Lord of the Wind, or the Spirit, or the God of the Storm. Talk a bit about that, because I think that's particularly interesting as it relates to the Prince of the Power of the Air.
Right. So that's Enlil. So Enlil, it probably means Lord of the Air, right? Lord of the Wind. There's some debate about that. Some people think it means Lord of Lords, and that's, I think, a possibility.
Right.
On that note, it's very interesting also to understand that when we find the word idol, IDOL, in the Bible, it's actually written as Elilim, right? So idols is Elilim or Elil. So Elil is Elil in Akkadian, which is Enlil, right? So we're really talking about the same thing. When God says, don't have any false gods, and don't bow down to idols, he's saying, don't bow down to Satan, don't bow down to Enlil. So Enlil is this usurper god. He's not the creator. And it's really quite plain in the literature that Enlil is not claiming to be the creator god. So the creator god is An or Anu, depending on the tradition. And, the creator god does his creation stuff, right? But then it's Enlil that separates heaven and earth. And Anu takes heaven as his portion, and Enlil takes earth as his portion.
Yes.
And what's so interesting about this is that he has the tablet of Destinies, which gives him the Anu-ship, right? So the Anu-ship is essentially, he has the authority to act as Anu, to act as the creator god. And
I was going to ask a question to follow up on
yeah,
the Destinies. You read this in the literature. Fellow that I read a lot, Joseph P. Farrell, talks about the Tablet of Destinies, and kind of gets into Hermeticism and some other things. But the Bible doesn't specifically, I don't believe, talk about the Tablet of Destinies. But if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of like having the charter, or the foundation
yes,
documents or something like
yeah.
that. You might clarify that for us.
Well, so as you continue in the book, you're going to see that when we get to the third part of the book, where the scroll at the right hand of the Father in Revelation chapter 5, I make the case that that actually is the Tablet of Destinies. It's not called that, of
I
course.
haven't gotten there. I'm about 2/3
Yeah.
through, and I thought,
Yeah.
already got so much to talk about. I'll have to read the rest later.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and what's interesting about that is when John sees this and he starts to weep, right? Because this angel just asks, who's worthy to open this scroll? It's not about who is strong enough. There's lots of strong angels that could do it. And it wasn't like Jesus comes and says, oh, I can open that thing. I'm strong enough, right? It wasn't like trying to get the glove off of Thanos in, Infinity War, right? If only we were stronger, we could pull this off. It's not about that. It's about who has authority. And nobody had authority except the one who had been slain. And it was because he was slain that he had authority. See, here's the thing. When God created Adam and Eve, he gave them dominion over the earth. He gave them dominion. He gave them authority over the planet. It's kind of like the keys to the car. And, Satan swindled them out of those keys. He swindled them out of the dominion of the planet. And so then it all falls to Satan. He has, sort of stolen it fair and square, if you will, right? And he's not going to give that authority back. And we know that he has authority because when he took Jesus to the high mountain, he said, look, all of this has been delivered to me. All this authority has been delivered to me, and I can give it to whoever I want. Just, I'll give it to you. Just, bow down and I'll give it to you. And of course, Jesus didn't do that. We're grateful. Jesus had to purchase it back in such a way that Satan didn't realize that he was getting
unseated.
Unseated.
Yeah.
Yes, because Satan isn't going to give it back just because. And what's crazy in the Sumerian or Mesopotamian tradition, there's something called the Akitu Festival.
Ah, yes.
I'm telling you, this thing blew my mind when I found this. I'm like, what?
Fascinating.
The Akitu Festival. So this Akitu Festival is where the earthly king would have this kind of reenactment of this episode. All right. So he would act as Marduk or Ninurta, and they would then bring the good news, Basurat Salmi, right? It's literally the gospel. They would bring the gospel that Anu had been killed, and they would take that good news to Enlil.
Yes.
And I was like, you've just got to be kidding me, right? Right. I mean, the word basura is the same word that we find in Hebrew, in the Hebrew Bible for gospel. Right. I was like, that's just crazy, and it's really basurat salmi. It's the gospel of peace. I'm like, no.
That is so wild. And of course it's a reverse gospel, if you will.
Right. Right. And to a certain extent, that was kind of true. We know that God obviously did something about it. But for that time period, he had the authority. He had the Tablet of Destinies. And the Tablet of Destinies gave him the authority to decree fates. And, this is why we see all this language in the New Testament, that Satan had, it says in Hebrews chapter 2, right, that he had the power of death, and that people were living in fear all their lives because he had this power. Jesus says that the God of this world is going to be judged. He's got nothing on me. But Jesus says that he is the God of this world, right? So it's not mincing words. And one of the titles of Ninurta, all right, so Ninurta is Nimrod. We'll get to that in a second. But just to look at this title, Ninurta. So Nin means Lord, same as Inanna. Nin is Lord, and then Urta means earth. So he calls himself the Lord of the earth. And you know what? He was.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He really was.
Let me challenge you one thing, or ask you to clarify. All right. So the issue of authority, the authority of Satan, we'll just use that name Satan as the generic that we're using.
Sure.
So when Christ is crucified, as Paul says, obviously very, very forthrightly in Ephesians, and Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given given to me, and it's now being passed to you. So how does that, in your mind, how does that change things? Because you do make a real strong case, that Satan is the Lord of the earth, but there's a change at Calvary, and I was wondering if you
Yes.
could talk to that.
There most definitely is a change at Calvary.
Mhm.
I absolutely agree. And that is the fulcrum of human history, right? This is the big thing. So, I would absolutely agree. And kind of looking forward to the end times,
Right.
Satan cannot make a move until he has authority again.
Yeah.
Right. And we see that in Revelation chapter 13, that the Antichrist or the beast is going to have authority for 42 months. It says that authority was granted to him. Where does he get that? That's a whole nother program, right?
Right.
That's actually in Corrupting the Image Part 3, right? So Volume 3
Okay.
is coming.
You
And
heard, you heard it here first, folks. It's gonna be part 3.
it's coming. But he can't fight God, who is all powerful, until he has authority. Again, Satan's not an idiot. And I sometimes think that we treat him like an idiot, but he's not. And he knows that if you go up against an all-powerful opponent, you're not going to win, right? If God and Satan arm wrestle, guess who's going to win, right? God's going to win, right? If Jesus had come back and only needed to show more power, there would have been no contest. I mean, he goes across the Sea of Galilee and he's met by this guy named Legion, right? A legion is somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 demons, right? That's a lot of demons.
You're getting that from the fact that a Roman legion was of that same size.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's in Luke, it actually says that there were 2 guys that met him. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So, so you have upwards of 10,000 demons that are going to withstand Jesus. And he is unfazed by them.
Right.
He simply says, "What's your name? All right, come out." Right. And these guys are trembling,
Yeah.
So it wasn't about.
Have you come to judge us before our day, before our time is due?
Right.
Which means that they know, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
Someday they're going to be judged. It's just that day has not yet come.
Right. But see, the whole thing is, Satan doesn't have equal power. It's not like God and Satan are somehow equal. They're not even close. God has infinitely more power than Satan. But if Satan has authority, then it's a different ballgame altogether.
Right.
Right. And here's the amazing thing is that when Jesus came on the scene, he went to the people who were in the shadow of the land of darkness. Okay. This is what it says in Isaiah. Right. I mean,
those who have seen a great light.
Yeah. Right. So nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. So, and of course, this is quoted in Matthew chapter 4. So when you understand geographically where Galilee is in relationship to Mount Hermon, you're like, oh, okay. Right. So, if this is the Sea of Galilee, so Mount Hermon is just like kind of up here, basically. Right.
Jesus was literally living in the same neighborhood, wasn't he?
Yeah. And that whole area was called the land of Bashan.
Which is
all right.
Interesting story.
Which is the word Bashmu in Sumerian. Right. So Bashmu is simply one of the different names of the dragon. He had a number of different names. He had the Mushhushu, he had the Anzu, he had the Ushumgalu, and he had the Bashmu. And these are just variations on a theme of the dragon.
Let's talk about the bull for a second, because you have, obviously when the Hebrews left Egypt, one of the first things that happened when Moses was gone for a little too long was they decided to create another bull, a golden calf, if you will. And I guess that even happened in not too long after Solomon and the kingdom split. Another bull, and I think Egypt, I think it's called Apos.
The Apis.
Yeah. Which was the worship of this bull. So this bull becomes a common symbol for Satan, or
Right.
So, and in fact, you mentioned, you might just talk about Psalm 22 and what it says there. That's also an interesting reference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so Psalm 22 and Psalm 68, I deal with those in the third part of the book, but those are talking about the bulls of Bashan. All right.
Yes,
So, and if you actually go back and look at the Hebrew, it says that many bulls have surrounded me. And it says the bulls of Bashan.
right,
When it says the bulls of Bashan, it doesn't actually say bull. It says abirim. So abirim is the word for mighty ones. Sometimes it's associated with a bull or an ox. There's no doubt about that.
mhm,
But it's really talking about divine beings who may have a kind of a Taurus type
right.
perspective,
Taurus
right?
the
Right.
bull. Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
another theme.
And
So
yeah.
is it saying there that the psalmist David, of course, here is like it's in this vision of seeing Christ at the crucifixion, and prophetically he's saying, I am surrounded by these Elohim that are the bad Elohim, the bad
Mhm.
divine beings. Is that how you interpret that?
Well, yeah, let's go to Psalm 68 because I think
Okay.
that will really explain a lot of things. This
All
is
right.
Psalm 68, verse 15. A
Right.
mountain of God is the mountain of Bashan. A mountain of many peaks is the mountain of Bashan. Why do you fume with envy, you mountains of many peaks? This is the mountain which God desires to dwell in. Yes, the Lord will dwell in it forever. The chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of thousands, etc. And so here the whole thing, the mountain of Bashan is Mount Hermon, right? They're one and the same place.
Mhm.
The word Hermon comes from the word cherem, which means to deprecate oneself, to curse
Mhm.
oneself. All right. And if we look at the book of Enoch, this is where the 200 angels that came down, they actually took a self-imprecation and they said, if we don't do this thing, then we're all cursed, right? And
Right.
that's where it got its name. And it's been known by that name for a very long time. As far back as we go, that's the name of the mountain.
Yes.
And looking in Ugaritic literature, we find that they kind of associated that mountain sort of as a Mount Olympus, if you will. Right? This is the abode of the gods. It's both heaven and hell. It's the place where the gods meet in a kind of a good way, like a Zeus way, but then also it's sort of Hades at the same time.
Right.
Which is interesting because where did Jesus take his disciples? He took them to the gates of Hades, right? The gate of Hades at the base of that mountain is where he said the gates of Hades will not
Shall not prevail.
yes, thank you, shall not prevail, right?
Right.
So that was at the base of the mountain. He then took his disciples to the top of the mountain
This is
and
near Caesarea Philippi, if memory serves.
yes,
Right.
exactly, Caesarea Philippi,
One of the
right?
supposed portals into the gates of Hades was there.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
And an inscription was found at the top of that mountain.
Yes, you go into that. Tell us about the inscription.
Oh man, I'll tell you that inscription. That was one of those things. So how when you're writing a book, you kind of stumble upon some
Oh
things
yeah.
sometimes, right?
Quite exciting to write because you learn new things.
Yeah, I know exactly, and I really didn't expect to go down that path. But what I what I wanted to know is that I kept reading this translation by George Nicholsburg,
Mm.
who's out of I think Princeton or Harvard. I think it's Harvard, and so I'm like, I keep reading about this inscription where it says, according to the command of the great and holy God, those taking an oath proceed from here. And I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. And
Right.
he equated it to the book of Enoch. I'm like, wow, that's really amazing, right?
Yes.
But I'm a little skeptical. I'm like, I want to see it myself, right? And I could not find it in Greek. I couldn't find where this thing was. Everybody was quoting what he had translated.
Okay.
So I went to the British Museum website. I found the inscription, and on the inscription, I found some language that didn't really match what he had
Right.
written. There was like two words. I'm like, wait, these don't fit. So anyway, make a long story short, one of the words that I found, one of them was bow. Bow means a bull or an ox,
Right.
right? So that's the whole idea of Satan being this bull.
Yep.
And then the other word is the word batios. And I discovered this word batios I mean, I looked and looked and looked in all of the literature I could find. I looked in every lexicon I could find. Nobody had anything on it. And then I stumbled upon it, and I found it in a little grotto, in a little cave in southern Italy, this same word. Again, once I kind of put it all together, I discovered this is actually a secret name for Satan. This is something that the scribes knew that Enlil and all of his various syncretisms or aliases, that they went by this name, and they used it kind of as a shorthand to just talk about him, right? And so the fact that it's on this inscription, it tells us that the command of the angels to come down and to take women to mate with them, make the Nephilim, that was at Satan's command.
Yeah, that's really an interesting thing, because as I recall from in Enoch, and certainly from Genesis, you don't get it. It sounds like that that there were 200 angels, and they sort of acted somewhat on their own with was it, how do you pronounce his name? Starts with an S.
Semyaza.
Semyaza. It looked like that he was sort of the leader of the group, and he was said, basically said, "Hey, look, I'm going to go do this, but I can't do it unless everybody else does it with me." And so they made an oath. They consecrated themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the source of the name Hermon, Mount Hermon. Right. So in this this record, I guess it's a stone record of the oath that they took, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
The question is, how old is that? How old that stone? We know the stone's written in Greek. It's not in Ugaritic or
nope.
something that's or early Hebrew.
Right.
The earlier Hebrew, right? So so it had to be part of tradition.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree, and it's one of those things, like, I wish I could prove that, right? But
even still, it could be 800 years before Christ or whatever, a long time before Christ, right?
Right. Well, and the fact that we find that word only in two places in the entire world, one is on top of Mount Hermon, and the other is in this cave in Italy. Right. And they both use this word batios, right? And so I traced the word batios back to a Sumerian logogram. So a logogram is, if you've ever seen cuneiform, it looks like chicken scratch, all right?
Yeah.
And so some of them have a name, like some things will like you come across this again and again. And so that this particular symbol, which is called a logogram, has its own name. Okay. It's kind of like how the letter H, none of us says H when we're using the letter H. We say ha, right? So hotel, we don't say ach hotel, right?
Right.
And we don't say W, we say w. Yeah. So that's the same basic idea. And so the name of the logogram is Bod, all right, which is ironic that it is
ironic. It's Bod.
I know. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So Bod, Bot, it's the same deal. Mm-hmm. So what I was able to do is to prove that word is Sumerian, right? Because it's on this Greek inscription, but that word is not Greek. And that's why George Nicholsburg and Charles Warren, when they translated it, they put "and holy," because they didn't know what to do with this word. It's not Greek. You do not find it anywhere in the literature.
A borrowed word from Ugaritic or Sumerian?
No, from Sumerian.
Sumerian. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so this takes us back to the Phoenicians, does it not? And what was going on perhaps there?
Well, yes, absolutely. But of course it takes us all the way back to Enlil, right? It takes us back. But there was this conscious syncretism. So this scholar out of Finland, Amar Anus, he talks about how there was this conscious syncretism going on between Enlil and Dagon. Yes. And what would happen, so they're the same god, right? Different names, different geography, but they're the same god. Yep. And the scribes would use this symbol, BAD, to represent both of those gods.
And they're all bod. They're all
exactly. Bod. I know. I should look into that word, because I'm like, I think I know where that word comes from. Yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah.
But here's the weird thing, is that usually you did not pronounce the name of the logogram.
Mm.
That was something that a scribe would know, but you wouldn't actually pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you would actually pronounce that logogram, gets pretty amazing too, is you pronounce it as Ug, right?
Mm.
Now there's no O in Sumerian.
Okay.
Okay, so if we go from Ug and then we transliterate that into Hebrew, we could get the word Og, right? So you could get,
like OG.
yeah, like Og of Bashan, right? Right.
Very interesting.
Og of
Please.
Bashan, right?
Yeah,
Wait
right.
a second, right? And he's called Og of the Bashan, right? And the word Bashan actually means snake dragon, right? So it goes back to the dragon, right? So here's Og of the dragons. He's king of them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you know,
fascinating. Well, and if I remember,
yeah,
the history properly, and you'll know it better than me, but it's as if when Joshua and Caleb come in and they start, tearing up the towns, and Jericho falls and Laish falls and all these places, so it's like they're clearing out all of these giants, but
yeah,
but Og wants to he doesn't want to move, if I'm not mistaken. He's sort of
right.
one of the last remnants, notwithstanding Goliath and his brothers and all that there was one family or something there.
Well, they took care of him before they crossed the Jordan.
Oh, did they?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So they did all this fighting in the land of Bashan.
Yes.
In that area.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But there were still giants that existed after him. I was kind of remembering.
Yes, indeed. You're absolutely right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he didn't want to, he didn't want to go down. Yeah. Right. But so here's the thing. This word Og or Ug, which is represented by this logogram Bad.
Yes.
It actually means death. Right.
Oh, wow.
And I'm wow. Right.
So like the king of the snakes and the king of death. And there's the king of the underworld. All that's
right.
Right.
Right. So that if you go to the Ugaritic text, so Ugarit is on the coast of the Mediterranean, Phoenicia, basically.
Another Semitic, just so people know, it's another Semitic language that we've learned a lot about ancient Hebrew from discovering Ugaritic text.
Yeah.
Right. It's right on the coast of today's Lebanon, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So they talk about that mountain, Mount Hermon, and they talk about it that it's that the god of death lives there, and that his headquarters. He doesn't live on the mountain. I mean, he's there, but he actually has his headquarters in Ashdod and Etre. And that's exactly what the Bible says is where he lives, where Og is from. Yeah. Right. You're like, oh, wow. Okay. Right. So we have extra biblical evidence that's talking about this same guy who's known as Death. Right. He's the king of death. And I mean, again, the amount of evidence that's pointing us back to all this different stuff is it's truly mind-blowing.
And he's one of the few people who we learned something about his bed too, don't we, in the Bible?
Right. Yeah. And I talk about how tall he was in Corrupting the Image 1.
How big is a cubit, right? Well, he was big, and his bed was very big.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It supposedly was still the Bible says that it was still in existence. You could go see his bed.
Right. It was made of iron, which was a big deal back then. Yeah. Iron was very costly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was probably close to 15 feet tall, somewhere in that.
Yeah.
In that
he was not a short guy.
No.
So, wow. So, you've taken us to a wide variety of things to consider. Let's back up for a little bit. I want to pick up a little bit on the concept of dragon and some of the ancient Sumerian, Mesopotamian pictures of the dragon and how that specifically appears in Revelation and in Daniel.
Right. Yeah. So the symbol of Enlil, he was known by a number of different things, but he was described as the Ushum Galu, right? So the Ushum Galu is the great dragon. Like that's literally what it means, the great dragon. He's also known as the Mushushu, which is the red dragon, right? And we're told in Revelation that I saw a great red dragon. You're like, wait, so if people have seen the Ishtar Gate, that is now in the museum in East Berlin,
Yep.
that that is that's the real thing, right? And on that gate, the Ishtar gate, you have these dragons, right? They have kind of a long neck. They have they're scaly, etc. That's called the mushushu. And then there's also the winged lion,
Yes.
right? And I didn't realize that those lions had wings till I took a closer look. I'm like, wait, those have wings on them, right? That is called the Anzu bird. They called it a bird. It looks more like a lion to me, but you know, it can fly. Okay, so this Anzu bird, this winged lion, is a chimeric creature. So it's a
It's a hybrid.
composite of, it's a hybrid. Yeah, exactly. So this hybrid, it spews out venom from its mouth. It has obviously wings. It's got eagle talons on the back feet. In some depictions of it, it has a scorpion tail. Right?
Right.
You know, and then, you know, as time goes on, it morphs a little bit. We start seeing it a little bit different. And then by the time we get to around 1200 BC, this motif shows up on what's called a Kuduru stone. It was some kind of a stone you'd put underneath your house, and it had all these curses. You know, if you steal from me, look out, Nergal is going to get you. Right.
Quite a cornerstone.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So,
right.
So they would put this under their house, and one of the creatures on there was called Nergal. So Nergal is king of the underworld. He's another instance of, you guessed it, Enlil.
Yeah.
And this blew my mind.
Yeah.
When you look at him, he looks like a centaur, right? Like Sagittarius. This is where Sagittarius actually comes from. He looks like a centaur. He has two heads, a human head and a lion's head.
Mm.
He has a scorpion's tail. Mm. He's got wings, and he has a serpent head phallus. Right?
Oh my. Okay.
I mean, yeah, like, and guess what? That's exactly what we see in Revelation chapter 9.
Yeah.
Right. When you start looking at that, and I looked at Revelation 9, and I realized that you kind of have Revelation 9a and 9b. You have these parallel descriptions that really superimpose one over the other. Mm-hmm. And when I superimposed them, then this picture came out, and lo and behold, I go and find it on this stone, this Kuduru stone. And, you know, I kept wondering, I'm like, okay, if this is a composite image, as I think it is, why are there two tails? I mean, what creature has two tails, right? A scorpion's tail, that's pretty bad. But then it says it has a tail with the head of a serpent, right?
Yeah.
And you know, again, then I found this stone, and it had really two tails. You know, so another way, or the ancient way to describe a phallus was just a tail. Okay.
Yeah.
So and so here you have a being that has a serpent head phallus. I mean, it's just
amazing.
It really was.
You have a picture which I thought was interesting. It's figure 8 in your book. Ninurta killing one of the heads of the 7-headed serpent.
Uh-huh.
All right. Now, this is from the Bible Review, October 1992. Now, this is pretty fascinating. So here you've got Ninurta. This is taking us back almost 3,000 years at least, right? And here you've got this 7-headed beast, dragon, of which one of the heads is being mortally wounded. Well, we've seen that image before, haven't we?
I know, right? I mean, pretty much everything, all of the symbols that we find in Revelation, not all of them, but I'd say probably most of them, we're finding these in ancient Mesopotamia.
Right.
And my belief is why it's that way is because we have to go back to that place. That's where it started. Mm-hmm. That's where it's going to end. That is the world system that has been exported to the whole world, and it started there. And God is wrathful against that place and all this, you know, crazy stuff that happened.
Right.
So anyway, that dragon that that Ninurta is killing, he also becomes known as that very symbol, right? So
that becomes like the dragon slayer.
He's you know, and this is the thing. It's like he's the dragon slayer, but then that becomes his symbol. Like he then kind of morphs
He sort of
with
takes
this.
on. It's like if you kill,
Yep,
this animal, you gain the spirit and soul of this animal, it becomes part of you.
exactly.
It's kind of like
Right.
a Native American idea.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so here he becomes known as, one of his descriptions is the seven-headed dragon with one head that's mortally wounded. I mean,
Wow.
wow.
Well,
Right.
this is getting us close to Nimrod. Maybe we, because you and I are going to have some interesting discussions on Nimrod. Maybe we kind of use this to transition a little bit from, okay, so you've got all these different names. You've got Markot, and you've got, Marduk, and you've got Ninurta, and you've got Nergal, and then Markar, and all these different folks. And Gilgamesh we're going to get to, but talk a little bit about why you think that Nimrod is sort of the embodiment or the historical figure upon which these gods were based.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at, well, first of all, we know that Nimrod comes from the land of Shinar, right? We're told point blank that he's established these different cities in the land of Shinar. So Shinar is Shnei Nerot. It means the two rivers, right? And that's like
rivers.
Mesopotamia, right?
Right.
I mean, that's it. That's Mesopotamia, two rivers. So Sumer and Shinar are the same word, right? They're exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Sumer, the kingdom of Sumer, we're talking about the kingdom of Shinar. That was all started by Nimrod. All right. So Nimrod's name in Hebrew means let's rebel. No parent is going to name their child let's rebel. It just doesn't make any sense. Who wants their kids to rebel? Stop rebelling, but you name me let's rebel, right? I mean, so I believe that what happened is the Bible deliberately changed or kind of gave us a different way to look at him.
So if Moses was the author, Moses decided to sort of shift the name a bit.
Well, I would suggest that somehow in the God tradition that this evil man had who was
known as Nimrod
was the rebel, right? He was the rebel. So when we take it back to and it was Amar Anus who pointed this out, that when we take the name Nimrod back to Akkadian, it comes out as Nin Urta. And it starts in Akkadian, right? So it's Nin Urta. So if you understand that N's and M's can be the same, T's and D's can be the same. They're the same, the same letter, right?
Right.
So Nin Urta is actually Nimrod, right? And so then the Bible is like, oh, you think you're Nin Urta, Lord of the earth. No, you're not. You're a rebel. You're Nimrod, right? And so
play on words.
Exactly. The Bible's doing a pun,
right?
They're taking his name and then they're kind of morphing it into something that reveals his true identity, his true character, which is the rebel.
Yeah.
And but in history he was known as Nin Urta. So Nin Urta is the Lord of the earth, and he is son of Enlil. Right? He's a son of Enlil.
Right.
And in the literature, many times you don't know if you're really talking about Enlil or if you're talking about Nin Urta. Because what happened as Satan or Enlil would give his qualities, his power, his throne to Nin Urta. Right. And so the epithets that are used of Enlil, he's the great dragon, he's the great mountain. We find that those same qualities and those same names are used for Nin Urta. So then we come back to the Bible, and what does it say? That Nimrod began to be a Gibor.
Yeah, that's of course a really interesting phrase. That
right.
Nimrod began to be a Gibor. Well, let's dissect that, and you're good at
right.
Let's dissect that.
So the word Gibor, it means hero. All right. Now, King David had some Giborim. He had some heroic men. So it doesn't automatically mean that he was a hybrid. But what's interesting is that Ninurta's some of his main epithets were the hero. right? So this is what he's known as. And Gilgamesh actually means ancient hero. Okay.
Right.
So you're
So
like,
there, right
okay.
off the bat, you have a legendary figure and what appears to be a historic figure, and they have in effect a common name.
Right. And then that takes us over to Melkart. All right. So Melkart is the king of Tyre. So if you're looking at Ezekiel chapter 28, God says to Ezekiel, take up a lamentation for the king of Tyre and for the prince of Tyre. Right. We're talking about Melkart. Right. Melkart is from Melek, which means king, and then Karat, which is city, the king of the city. So the king of the city is this god known as Melkart.
Right.
And in a bilingual inscription found in Malta, it's Melkart on the Phoenician side and it's Heracles on the Greek side.
Yes, which is
Right?
also another name for Hercules, right?
Exactly. Right. So we've heard of this guy, right? We know that he's the
Heard of
hero.
this guy. Yeah, the
Yeah,
great hero. That's right.
exactly.
Hero.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So this whole idea of the hero, we know him best as Hercules. He's the hero. But that idea of hero goes all the way back to Ninurta, which goes back to the Hebrew Gibor, which is the hero. Okay. And he's known as the son of Enlil. And Enlil gives him his power, his throne, and his authority, right? And that's exactly what we see in Revelation 13, that the dragon, which is Enlil,
right,
gives the beast his power, his throne, and his great authority, right? Now, Satan, last I checked, is kind of selfish, that he doesn't like to share. And, he's only going to give those things away if it serves his purpose, if it exalts himself. And that's what he did in the ancient world, is by giving his power and authority and throne to Ninurta, it actually benefited his own, bottom line.
His own agenda. Right.
Exactly. Right. And so what I think happened is, just as you have this overshadowing of the Holy Spirit over Mary, I think in some way that Enlil was able to overshadow the human Nimrod to then make him into a Gibor, so that he became a hybrid.
Yeah. Now this really opens the door that for me is really truly the ground where angels fear to tread, because you're really going to get now into the issue of the DNA as information and the gamete and the egg, and and how could all this stuff really come to pass, and it's pretty hairy, getting into it. And by the way,
it is.
It's very dangerous ground theologically, because the people at Chalcedon probably would scratch their heads over what you're getting ready to just tell us about.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well,
Chalcedon, by the way, was where they worked out the creed as to the exact nature of Christ. How could he be both God and man without the natures being confused, and yet he be fully God and fully man? And so it was a tempest that ultimately split the church in about 12 different ways. This happened in the 5th century. All right.
Well, I'll try not to cause a split here.
It's the big split. Okay, go ahead. Good luck with that.
Of course. Yeah, I know. The thing is, they knew nothing about genetics, all right?
That's true. Not although apparently Jacob knew a little bit about spotted sheep and black and white sheep and things like that.
Fair enough. I'm with you there.
Yeah,
I'm totally with you there.
Yeah.
So this came out in 2019, that a guy named Chris out of Reno, Nevada, was a bone marrow transplant.
Yeah.
He recipient, I don't know if he had I think he had leukemia. Okay. So he gets a bone marrow transplant from a donor in Germany. So some researchers are kind of following this guy, right? And they're taking his DNA samples and whatnot. And then at about 3 or 4 months into this, they take a sample of his sperm, and they discover a shocking discovery.
It ain't his anymore.
It's not him. Right. His sperm was no longer his own, but that of his donors.
Yeah.
that's shocking, right? I mean, that
Uh,
is
it,
just shocking.
it was certainly unpredictable too. I don't think people
Right,
thought that kind of transplant could cause a shift in the characteristics of what you pass down.
right,
In your not phenotype, but sees the genotype in your genotype. Yeah. Oh,
right.
amazing.
So think of the implications. If he has children, if he's the sire of children, they're not genetically his.
Right.
They're genetically his donors, right? I mean, so that kind of blows my mind, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
so I can't tell you the nth degree as to how Satan did it on a technical basis. I don't know that, right?
Mhm.
But I know that from what we know about genetics and whatnot, that this is not outlandish to think that this could happen. And so somehow Satan was over to overshadow Nimrod. And then my theory is that by a prolonged possession, if you will, this prolonged overshadowing, it then started to act upon his DNA so that he changed. Right? It didn't happen instantaneously, but it would have taken some time for him to actually to transform and become, so that his DNA would become the DNA of Satan, right? And
See,
that's something I really established in Corrupting the Image 1,
right.
is that Satan and angels actually have DNA.
Mhm.
And I know it's hard to believe, like, oh, that's
Yeah,
ridiculous. Yeah, but it says it in the Bible, right?
yeah.
That
There are just some
I will
things that
cause,
we have to take by faith, and that
right.
and
Yeah.
that and the evidence for it is there,
Yeah.
but it doesn't quite say that. And yet, it seems like that we can't really understand some of these things if we don't go ahead and accept that is the way that it is.
Yeah. Well, if you the Bible talks a lot about seed, and if we
Right.
start looking at what is a seed, well, what is a seed? I mean, is it the little kernel on the out? Is it the shell on the outside? Well,
And
not
it typically relates to the male, right? And so in the Bible,
no.
it does not.
Well, in the Bible, yes, right. In the
In
Bible,
the
yes,
Bible, yes.
right.
And the reason that
Yeah.
I point that out is obviously the seed of the woman,
Hmm.
is sort of a foreshadowing of the virgin birth, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken. Okay, before we had our technical difficulties, we were getting ready to go down a path that I'm sure we have to tread very carefully, because we're getting into the issues exactly how um, that the Holy Spirit and Mary could create Jesus Christ. So I'm going to turn it over to Doug Hamp, and he's going to explain all about it.
Right. Well, God is God, and God will do what he wants. But as I understand the genetic situation, the overshadowing by the Holy Spirit, the overshadowing of Mary, was that he then provided the Y chromosome. Right. And what I talk about in Corrupting Image 1, which again blew my mind, is that um, every man has a virtually identical copy of Adam's Y chromosome. Right. This is according to two evolutionary biologists who talk about that. They write it in their paper. This is Bradman and Thomas in their paper YY, the evolution of the Y chromosome and the migration, or something like that.
So
And
you're not just quoting yourself from book one, but this actually is, even evolutionists say, for some strange reason, this Y chromosome that men have seems to go back to time
yeah,
immemorial, right?
Yeah, this is not me quoting myself, right? I'm not making this stuff up. I quoted people that know about this
Yeah.
stuff, and because I don't, right?
Right.
And again, it blew my mind that they're talking about how we all have the same Y chromosome, and we all carry the same genetic load, the same mutations, and they say that there was some kind of a record of an event that happened in the life of that original man. And they're like, well, it wasn't that bad. In my opinion, I'd say,
where did that original man come from, though? Of course, right?
Right. But what is this marker? There's some kind of a deleterious marker in the Y chromosome in the original man. And I'm like, I think I know, right? It's called the fall. It's called the fall of man. And that's sin,
It's called sin. Can you say nature?
Yeah. So, but looking at it from a genetics point of view, it's not a moral issue. It's a genetic issue. And that's what I would say is that, yes, we all blow it. We all break God's commandments. And so we're all guilty in that respect. But what I'm passing on to my children is not so much my moral failure, but I'm passing on my genetic failure. Right. There's a whole thing about epigenetics. And so I probably pass on some of my bad habits too.
The epigenetics, there's what they've discovered, of course, just to make this a little bit more interesting, but it would be good for you to comment on it if you have a comment, but is that whatever we do in our life, it does have an influence upon our genetics.
Yes, it does.
Something that, let's say 15, 20 years ago, that was just, nobody thought that was true.
That's right.
Right. But it's why, for instance, I did this when I was teaching a class on why are the poor in my entrepreneurship class, that there's now this belief based upon actual science that to some extent the poor are poor because they've grown up being poor, and it's affected their very genetic makeup, which is just horrible to think about, but yet it seems to be true. All right. So saying that, now I'll let you.
Right. So epigenetically, what that means is that there are various chemical markers that get attached onto our genes, on, okay? And those are learned responses, learned behaviors. So the child of nuclear scientists is going to have a greater aptitude to be a nuclear scientist, right? The child of two drunks is going to have a greater likelihood of becoming a drunk, him or herself, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Right. So that's the epigenetic level. Then there's the genetic level. Genetics that deal with, our bone structure, our eye color, our hair color, right? And again, in the Y chromosome, the Y and X are what determine the gender of the child. So, right. So if it's an XY, it's a boy, XX, it's a girl. So that Y chromosome contains the record of an event that was deleterious to the original man. And every man on the planet carries it, right? Except one, and that was Jesus, because he was not born of a human father, right? Human mother, but not a human father, right? So it's just like, wow, that's incredible,
Let's have a little fun with this. So I'm going to ask you one question, and I got another one for you in a second. But all right, so I guess if Dan Brown was right, and Jesus and Mary Magdalene had offspring, they had a girl. Unfortunately, if they'd had a boy, it'd be a different question, because wouldn't the boy then have Jesus's Y chromosome? And how would that have influenced the human race? But apparently, we believe that didn't happen because he didn't have children. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I certainly don't. I don't think that Jesus had any physical progeny.
Right.
However,
yes,
it says that no one having been born again continues to sin, for the seed of God dwells in him.
Bingo.
Right?
Now,
1 John 4:9.
There's something that we have always thought that was just metaphorical.
Right.
It's not just metaphorical, is it, Doug?
Right. And also in Isaiah 53, it says that he shall prolong his day. He shall see his seed. Talking about Messiah, so what I would suggest is that, while, I mean, there are some people that think that this body is transformed here and now, maybe, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of that myself, but I would definitely say that in the resurrection, right? In the resurrection. That's why we have to be born again, right? And we're going to have his genetic makeup. We're going to have,
seed is within us, but it hasn't fully blossomed yet, has it?
right. Yeah. And this is where I think sometimes we have these weird ideas that, we're going to kind of be these ghost-like beings in the age to come, but we're going to have a real body.
Right.
It's not going to be made of carbon anymore, but it will be made of a spirit substance. But that spirit substance still has genetic information,
That's, of course, that's wild, but that seems to be what 1 Corinthians 15 seems to say. Right? That there's going to be another body that's going to be, it's going to be us, but it's not going to be made of material that's fallible.
Exactly. Yeah. So, there's still a lot of question marks on that regard, but it's pretty amazing stuff,
You go back to the Christology though of this, and this is where the people at Chalcedon, would have really been struggling. This happened about 100 years after the Nicene, get together. I think it's about 25 miles up the road, closer to Turkey, at Chalcedon, and that's what they were struggling with, though, is how could God create himself in human form, mixing his DNA with Mary's DNA, and yet retain fully the deity of Jehovah? How does that happen, right?
Right. It's still a hard question. And now we know a lot about genetics, but when they didn't know really much of anything about genetics, I can only imagine how challenging that would have been. But I think part of the answer is understanding that seed is, it's not just, think of a sunflower seed, right? We just like, oh, there you go. But what really is a seed? A seed is information, and information is non-material. That's the key that unlocks this mystery. Information is non-material. It requires a physical medium.
Well,
yes, it requires.
You still have to have the DNA molecule, of course, is material.
I agree with you.
Like 4 different, nucleic acids or whatever.
Yep.
So there's always the physical, and then there's the spiritual that somehow supersedes that. It's like goes beyond just the physical. It's like the mind and brain kind of thing, right?
Well, so in his book, In the Beginning Was Information, Werner Gitt talks about how the chalk on a chalkboard, or the marker on a whiteboard, that's information, or is it? Well, it kind of is, right? It's not so much the ink on the whiteboard, but it's the arrangement of that ink on the whiteboard, or chalk on a chalkboard. It's the arrangement of that the information itself is still non-material, right? Because once you take it away and you still have the chalk dust, right? So the chalk is still physically present,
right?
But the information has been destroyed because the information was never physical. Even though it can be stored in a physical medium, the information itself is non-material.
You're going to quickly get into Plato's concept of the ideals.
Yes.
So let's jump away from this discussion. Interesting. Let's go back and talk about Nimrod now. And
yeah, let's do it.
That's kind of where we got started down this path, which I think is a very fascinating path. Unfortunately, most of this we're not going to know the answers to until the other side of the rapture, whenever that occurs. But Nimrod, your point of view, and mine is not the same as yours in this case. Your point of view is that somehow Satan was able to transform, do a genetic splice and change the genetics of Nimrod such that he became a hybrid. He became a mighty one. Now, I actually believe that there is that probably did happen. I don't necessarily go along with the concept that happened prior to the Tower of Babel, and the Tower of Babel was a direct result of Nimrod and Satan and so forth, because I have a different view of chronology.
Okay.
But conceptually, I'm kind of okay with the idea, that Nimrod is the sort of prototypical figure for the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm certainly in agreement that all of the history that we've talked about, feeds into Nimrod and provides this whole sort of modus operandi of what the Antichrist is going to be like, and that there is some sort of epigenetics that went on here, and Nimrod becomes Satan incarnate. So I'm kind of there, but I'm not fully subscribed. Again, my issue has to do with chronology and when the Tower of Babel happened and so forth. But tell us more about your view, since this show's about your book, not mine.
Well, I think it's fascinating. And, again, to be fair, chronology is very difficult. And I commend you for taking on that very difficult task of, trying to figure out the chronology.
Right.
And I tried to not make a hard case that Nimrod is absolutely the creator. I would say he was at least the one who inspired. Okay. Right. If he didn't build it himself, he inspired it. Is what I would suggest.
Okay.
Although I do think that the Tower of Babel itself was created to be a type of
meeting place between God and man.
Yeah, a ladder between the two realms, right? To be a portal,
absolutely.
A stargate.
I agree with you. How do you say Nabopolassars?
Nabopolassar, right?
Nabopolassars, who was the father of Nebuchadnezzar, which I can't say. And
yes.
That he was likely trying to rebuild on the same spot as the original tower. Is that your point of view?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
I'm in agreement. With that. And it turns out that, as I recall, I guess it was Sennacherib, when they destroyed Babylon, which was about 75 years or so before before Babylon. It was about, how many years was it from the time of Sennacherib until Babylon, the first Babylon, was destroyed? Because it's the second Babylon, Neo-Babylonian Empire of Nebuchadnezzar, that gets constructed around 715 BC, and exists for roughly 80 years before it's conquered by the Medes and Persians.
Right. Yeah.
So, but the Assyrians did destroy Babylon, and my understanding was that one of the things that the Assyrians wanted to do was destroy this tower that was, in some sense, had been rebuilt somewhat, because it was in effect rejecting the idea that the god of Babel was bigger than the god of Assyria or Nineveh or whatever. Because back to your point about the city god of Tyre, Melkart, or
Melkart.
James Melkart, right? That all of these ancient cities had a city god. They were city states, and they had their god was to be the greatest.
Yeah,
like Diana of the Ephesians was the
right
for them. So,
and it turns out they're all the same.
It turns out they're all the same, right? So you don't really win that argument,
Right?
You got to variation together.
Yeah. It's just a variation on a theme, really. That's
exactly. Yeah. So anyway, the concept is that you see the tower being destroyed, kind of again and again and again, and then it is built up. It's not destroyed by the Persians, and it's not destroyed by Alexander the Great. And so that leads to a different question, which is interesting to me, which is Jeremiah 50 and 51 about when is Babylon really destroyed, and so forth. But I venture too far afield. Let's go back to Nimrod, and let's go back to what he did and why you believe that Nimrod, in effect, was the person who was responsible for the creation of the Tower of Babel.
Right. So, as I was saying before, that so if Satan and Ninurta, or Nimrod, if they somehow merge, and I believe that they did, I think really it kind of goes back to what is Satan's main thing. He knows that there is a prophecy of doom hanging over his head, that this seed of the woman is going to come and step on his head, right? So he had authority of the world, but again, smart guy, he understood that there could be a way for it to be overturned. So if he can somehow stop this prophecy from having a fulfillment, then he can seal his reign over the earth forever and ever and ever.
Right.
And I think that before the flood, when the angels came down, he was looking for a way to essentially incarnate himself and the other fallen angels into this realm. God obviously put the kibosh on that through the flood. And so then Satan has to kind of change his tactics just a little bit. And then he turns to one person, namely Nimrod or Ninurta.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, the real question is, okay, if you're Satan and you want everybody to follow you, what do? You have to give something. So if you want to have this portal, you got to have a buy-in from man, right? Because, Satan and the other fallen angels, they're incorporeal, right? So they cannot affect directly change in this world. So they have to have a buy-in from humans. How do they do that? It's the woman that rides the beast. She's the lure to the fish, right? She's the lure on the hook. Mm-hmm. And once you get people lured, then they get the hook in their mouth, and then you got them. Mm-hmm. So you give the Tower of Babel. It's known as the pleasure palace of the gods, right?
Right.
It's also known as the ladder between heaven and earth. Where do we hear about a ladder between heaven and earth? Jacob? Oh yeah, that's right. Right.
Well,
Jacob's ladder.
I was thinking Led Zeppelin, but go ahead.
Right. Exactly. Right. And then Jesus says, I am the ladder, right? Angels are going to ascend and descend on me. Mm-hmm. But what Satan was saying is that, no, he says, I am the ladder between heaven and earth. Mm-hmm. And then this area of Babylon became known as the connection point between heaven and earth. And it was it was the ziggurat, right? And that's the it's a portal, it's a some kind of a gateway between these two realms. And so that's what I think he was trying to do, is ultimately to open up a portal between the realms.
Right. Well, this is really the big question, I think, and the big issue. I think we need to backtrack a second, though, just to clarify, because this is sort of program 2. Program 1 was the incursion of the angels on Mount Hermon, electing to create their own offspring. And this is one of the things I wanted to quiz you on, because I was not sure I agreed on this one point.
Okay.
Your suggestion is that the angels had offspring because they could then have a physical body that they then would inhabit.
Yes.
As opposed to, I guess my view, just to be clear, and then I'll obviously let you respond. My view is that the angels they had offspring, the Nephilim. The angels are taken at some point and put in Tartarus, mm-hmm. right? And the spirits, you indicate that there isn't a soul that's been created in these Nephilim. But since it is sort of like empty, that the angels would inhabit that. To me, that sort of is mixing up the difference between angels and demons and so forth. So talk about that.
Well, so in one of my appendix 1, right. I actually talk about how really there's no difference between an angel and a demon. And I know that a lot of people see that differently. So I
disagree with that, but go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So a lot of my argumentation is based on the language. Okay, so the word demon comes from the Greek daimonios, right? So a daimonios just means a mighty one. Mm-hmm. And the word Elohim means a mighty one. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the B'nai Elohim, we're talking about the sons of the mighty one, who is God, of course, but they are also called Elohim. So they're mighty ones. In the Greek, they're known as daimonios. Mm-hmm. In a passage there,
the Book of Enoch, to me, seems to be very expressive and very specific.
Yep.
That the souls of the Nephilim, when the Nephilim die, those souls become demons, right? Yep. And that those demons basically wander the earth to, give us a hard time, which they've been doing pretty effectively for, 6,000, 7,000 years, whatever the number is.
Sure.
And yeah, so okay, go ahead.
Well, and I would essentially agree with you. My caveat would be that I think we've understood the basic meaning of daemonion. Okay. So this is from Acts 17:18,
Okay.
where the philosophers thought that Paul was speaking to them about other gods similar to Zeus or Apollos, and yet the word here for gods is actually daemonion, right? So demons,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they understand that the gods of the ancient world are demons. And we see this in Deuteronomy 32, verse 17. They sacrificed to demons, not to God, to gods they did not know. The Hebrew there is shedim. All right. So shedim in Hebrew, daimonios in the Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go back to that, again, the word daimonios, back in Homer's time, it just meant somebody who was sent from heaven, or that which is divine.
Okay.
In Philo's writings, he says that when the angels of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, they took unto themselves wives of all whom they chose. Those beings whom other philosophers call demons, Moses usually calls angels,
Mm.
right? So, and we go and we look at various dictionaries and whatnot. So again, demons are just known as rebellious or fallen angels.
Certainly, Paul
They're
talks about, does he not, in terms of sacrificing, to demons,
Yep,
talking about, you know, why you don't want to eat some of the things
yep,
that have been sacrificed to demons. And
yep,
of course, he says, I think he's consistent, as I would expect he would be, regarding demons being these gods, right?
right.
And that, of course, Michael Heiser, I don't know how much you study Heiser or no, but he certainly talks about the Elohim and
Uh-huh.
divine council, of course,
Yep,
and the fact that the Elohim were the 70 were
yep,
at the Tower of Babel. After the Tower of Babel, they are then assigned to the nations, right? And they become like the Prince of Greece, the Prince of Persia, and
right,
so that's his point of view. And so,
right.
I guess the real question then is how do we understand are there really differences between angels and demons? And my sense is that if the angels were taken and put into Tartarus, that they couldn't become inhabitants of these bodies. But I think that's what you were trying to say. And is plan one is that's the way that Satan wanted to inhabit the physical world because they have trouble manifesting in the physical world.
Yes.
Was plan one.
Right. So, and essentially what I'm saying is that when they created these Nephilim, they were empty shells.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So they were empty shells waiting to be inhabited.
Mhm.
And so then the spirits of these angels would then enter into that. And now you have an avatar. Okay.
Mhm.
So when they died,
Mhm.
um, and we don't know how many of them did this. And again, partly this has to do with how many times can an angel sort of manifest
Mhm.
and make, how many of these little Nephilim baby bodies can you make? I don't know. I mean, I don't.
How many generations too, right?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, I just don't know. But what I would suggest is that at least those 200 that did the dirty work on Mount Hermon, they got in big trouble for
Yes.
what they did.
Right.
But then I believe they were creating bodies for other angels to come and inhabit. And then
Okay.
when those bodies were killed,
Mhm.
according to Enoch, then they were just known as the demons. All right. But again, if we look at the language, we see that daemonius just means mighty ones from heaven.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So it doesn't mean that it's some disembodied spirit from the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And even the word angel just means messenger. We see that Michael has angels and that Satan has angels,
Right.
and that there are different classes of these beings. I'm completely in agreement with that. We clearly have the cherubim, which I think are also seraphim, but
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Well,
well,
we have
yeah,
powers and principalities,
yeah,
rulers of
sure,
authorities, right? So there
yeah,
is a hierarchy, right,
yes,
among
yes,
the angelic host.
yeah,
And yeah, your view, I don't agree with your view, but I think your view is interesting. It's based upon an understanding of the language, which you understand a lot better than I do. And so I'll defer to you there. So my sense, though, is that based upon, I would argue that there is a distinction that you draw there, and that demons, that when the angels had the Nephilim, that they were not empty shells, and when Nephilim had more Nephilim, in other words, second generation, third generation, they were still creating spirits that could not be saved.
Right.
They were souls and spirits, but the
Right.
spirit was not enabled. It was never going to be able to talk to God the way that
Right.
the being spirit was going to be enabled to talk to God, even though it was kind of covered over at the fall.
Yeah. I mean, I have a problem with that, because I just, to have a spirit that's born or created with no potential to have a relationship with God through no fault of its own,
Right.
no opportunity for salvation.
Yep.
It doesn't, I don't know. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
That doesn't feel like the God that you believe in and know.
Well, it sounds very Calvinist, and I'm not a Calvinist.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Well, I'm just a wee bit, not a whole lot. I'm not a fine pointer, but I'm a little wee bit there. Yeah. And, and so, but it's a great discussion. And one that's, I think, really intriguing. And it does. So now to jump to plan 2. Okay. So what you're saying is that God put the kibosh on that. That was plan 1. That ended at the flood. The flood was done in part to eliminate plan 1, right? Now we have plan 2, and plan 2 really is creating these meeting places, the ziggurats, the pyramids, whatever, so that at that location, that the realm of the gods and the realm of humans could interact. Now, here's my problem with that.
Okay.
We know that based upon real life experience of the demon possessed and so forth, that demons do manifest. I don't know what your view of UFOs is, and whether or not that means, that you take them to be demons and things like that. But there appear to be plenty of ways for there to be portals between, the divine or the supernatural world and the natural world. And so speak to that if you would, because I know that part of you at least agrees with that, but you may have a different way of thinking about that.
No, I think I pretty much agree with that. I would just say it comes at a cost, right? I mean, we see that good angels, whether angels or demons, it doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned, is the bottom line. Right. But good angels, let's think about the angels that went to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yes.
Right. They could just manifest. You and I are told to entertain people because we might be entertaining angels for all we know. Right.
Unawares. Right.
And, and there seems to be no cost for them to come into this dimension. Right. Whereas for a demon or, a fallen angel, whoever, they have to have sacrifices. Like they are in need of blood. And so my whole point there, I talk about batteries are us. That was one of the chapters I had where,
right.
It's kind of like the Matrix, that the machines need some kind of energy source.
They need to have power ups.
Right. And I would suggest that when Satan was disconnected from God, according to Ezekiel 28, he lost the connection. He was unplugged from God. And now he's kind of running on battery power, if you will.
Right.
And just like we're running on battery power, so to speak. But how do we recharge our batteries? We eat things from the Adamah, right? We're Adam. We eat things from the Adamah. It's of like nature. Yep. And we can derive energy from that to keep ourselves going for a while. Satan is in a similar bind, but he's not of the Adamah. He's a spiritual being. So he needs a different source of energy. And that energy is blood, is what I would suggest, because blood is not just hemoglobin, it's actually spiritual.
Okay, well, that's the point then, because I was going to say, well, blood is obviously material as well, but what you're saying is that there is the spirit is in the blood or whatever.
Yes, the life is in the blood.
Life is in the blood, and so there, that whether it turns out to be true or not, I think you're saying it would be true. I don't know, but I do know this, that the truly evil in this world that are in effect in league with the devil, which I am, is very, very, very real. Right. Blood sacrifices and all that absolutely is part and parcel of their approach.
Yes.
That is a necessary way for them to gain power. Yes. And so forth. So that seems to be plan 2, comes in many forms. The ziggurats and the mythologies around the connection between God and man, the the supernatural world and the natural world meeting in this sort of, used to be called, or sometimes called, the axis mundi,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
centerpiece. There's also a whole thing I was going to ask you about. Well, maybe we'll close with this: is the cosmological mountain, which the pyramids and the ziggurats were to be, in effect, sort of a symbol of, like, the mountain of God. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that's interesting to me is whether or not Mount Hermon is the mount of the gods, and it plainly is in Ugarit and in other, in the Bible. But yet there's also this mountain of the north, which is Jabal. What was it? That's on the border of Syria.
Saphon.
Yeah, Zaphon.
Okay.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, speak to that if you would. You might explain to the listener what I'm talking about there, because I didn't do it very well.
Well, yeah. So this kind of goes back to Satan's his fall. He says that he's going to, sit on the farthest sides of the north, or so Yechetet Saphon, right? And it is interesting whether Saphon is an actual mountain. There is such a mountain called
Phone
Saphon.
means north, right?
Right. It
Right.
does.
Yeah.
And yet we also know that Psalm 46, Psalm 48 are both talking about the city of God.
Yes.
It's beautiful in elevation on the farthest sides of the north,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that same designation is being used for God's holy city. And we're told in Hebrews chapter 12, I think, it talks about you've come to Mount Zion,
Right.
to the city of the living God, right? To the New Jerusalem. So we're told very clearly that that's the same place. And what I would suggest is that the cosmic mountain is the New Jerusalem. And that's where Satan was hanging out before his fall.
Okay.
Now, this kind of gets into a little bit of cosmology, and we may disagree on some of the timing.
And I would tell readers that you focus a lot on the issue of cosmology relative to how does the supernatural and the natural differ, and how does Satan and the fall and all that influence that cosmology. So
Right.
I'm not going to get into it now. It's challenging. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, it is. I'm just trying to put the pieces together. That's all I'm.
No, I didn't mean to say don't go ahead. I meant
no, that's fine.
Stefan and the mount. I know that Michael Heiser, I don't think I'm misquoting him. I believe that he argues that the cosmological mountain, the Mount of God, is Zaphon, and ultimately Mount Zion, yes. But it seems as if he, in his understanding, and this comes from his understanding of Ugaritic as well, that it is Mount Zaphon. And I think Derek Gilbert kind of goes along with that too. I don't know. Have you talked with Derek about any of this?
Well, he did the forward to my book, which was really cool. Yeah.
Kind of why I wondered if he had chatted about it.
Yeah, we haven't gotten into the whole Zaphon issue.
Okay.
That's something I'm going to deal more with in Corrupting
Book
the Image. 3. Yes.
I do talk about the cosmological mountain, and I get into this quite a bit in Rebooting the Bible Part 2. That's why I'm interested in it. But
it's very interesting stuff. I love it.
It's understanding kind of Mount Zaphon, Mount Hermon, and Mount Zion, right?
Yeah.
And there's a great paper, I think, that even Douglas Riggs cites on his website that I quote in my book, that really digs into this whole issue of the cosmological mountain, talks a bit about the pyramids and the ziggurats and all that. So for those listeners that are interested in this subject, it is a theological cornucopia of fascination. So you might want
I would just say this, that I think that the ziggurats are a copy of God's holy mountain,
yes,
right?
Indeed.
Regardless of where it is. Okay. But I would suggest that Satan is trying to create heaven on earth, so to speak. Right. And the mountain that he got booted off of, I think we can agree with that he definitely got booted from God's holy mountain, according to Ezekiel 28.
Right.
And so he's been trying to create his own mountain here, whether it's a physical mountain like Mount Hermon, or if it's an artificial mountain like a ziggurat in Babylon, or the Tower of Babel. He's creating his own mountain where he's king of the mountain.
Yeah.
Right? That's essentially it.
Well said.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
And while he has authority on earth and God essentially can't touch the earth, so to speak, he's like, look, I won, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, I know you're still in heaven. You still got your place. You got your city. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I got the planet and I made my own mountain. I don't need your lousy mountain, you know? And so I think that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and I think that's, I think it's a very thoughtful way to, depict what Satan's plan is. And of course, it gets into all kinds of other issues that we get into, which is once again back to this authority of, yes, Satan has, we might call it this residue of his plans, and yet, and he's still very active, and yet the reason that the church is not storming the gates of Hades, we'll say, is primarily ignorance and failure to understand the authority that we have in Christ. And we listen to that, that phrase that Christ talks about, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And we assume that Christ is talking about a defensive strategy. My view is he's not. He's talking about an offensive strategy.
You got to read part 3.
Okay, good. We're thinking along the same lines.
We are, yes.
We get busy. Part of what we're supposed to be doing is just like Jesus did on the Mount of Transfiguration, which is Mount Hermon, in my view, not Moriah, but Mount Hermon.
Yeah,
that we're to be reclaiming the ground and retaking back the territory that has been ceded by our forebears. So
yeah. Oh, we're totally on the same wavelength. I mean, that's in part 3 of volume 2. And it's really exciting when you see that Jesus didn't come. He was just kind of this meek and mild guy who, no, he came as a warrior, but he was undercover, right? Yes. He wasn't coming with a gigantic army. He wasn't coming with a display of glory. Yep. This was kind of go back to World War II, right? This was the undercover spy, who had to get the enemy to believe something contrary so that he would make a fatal blunder, right? And then the spy would be willing to die to save his patria, right? Yeah. And that's kind of what Jesus did, right? He's like, in fact, I talk about this. I mean, I think it's so exciting. I think when he goes up for the transfiguration, I think it's kind of a decoy. Satan did not know when the day of the Lord was going to come. He just knew it was coming. He didn't know when, right? So here's Jesus. He takes 3 of his disciples up on top of Mount Hermon. He transfigures. Here are Elijah and Moses, the 2 guys who kicked his butt, by the way.
Yes.
Right? Moses took care of King Og, and Elijah had this showdown with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. And most scholars are agreed that those 400 prophets of Baal were really just the same dude as Melkart, who is the king of Tyre in Ezekiel 28, right?
He's a sleeping god that has to be awakened, which Elijah plays his trump card there. Oh, maybe your God's predisposed. He can't wake up right. Oh, go wake him up. That's why he's not burning up the sacrifice. Go wake him up.
Right.
So, you understand all these things that you talk about, and I'll bridge it out to our conclusion. Doug has got just a wealth of understanding. Of course, you can see from our show, he understands the languages, and understanding those languages opens the door to all kinds of new insights, which, for the student of the Bible that really wants to understand these things, this book is one that you really want to take a close read. You're not going to agree with everything, but you're going to learn a lot of new things, and a lot of these new things you learn, you're going to really agree with. And so I recommend it highly. So Doug, tell people how they can get your book and how they can find you.
Yeah, so it is currently available as a pre-order on Amazon. So if they go to Corrupting the Image 2, Hybrids Hades and the Mount Hermon Connection, or just put in Corrupting the Image and it'll come up, and part 2 is available. It's coming out April 8th. Really excited about that.
Oh, that's just a couple of weeks away now.
I know. Yeah. So I've been working really diligently to get this thing ready. So it'll be up in Kindle, also in paperback, and I'll put it on my website before too long here.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And should people visit your website? How would they do that?
So that would be douglashamp.com. And they can get Corrupting the Image 1 ebook. They can also get the audiobook. So I actually did an audiobook of that. So if you don't want to read it, you want to just listen, you can do that as well.
Excellent. How long did it take you to do the audiobook? I've been scared away thinking it take to read
Well,
books.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. What was it
Hours, right?
8 or 9, 10 hours, something like
That's
that.
not that bad. That's not that
Yeah, you just got to read the thing, So
Gotta read it with a little bit of excitement, I think.
I tried. Yeah, I tried. Yeah. So,
well, all right. So thank you, Doug, for being with
Okay.
us today. And I hope that I've enjoyed having you in and us going in and dissecting some of your creative work. So it's been great. So anyway, everyone, just remember that the Lord is coming soon. Do study these kinds of issues. You want to be prepared. You want to know a few things you can talk to the Lord about when you finally meet him face to face. Okay. All right. So thanks, everybody. God bless.